Teal dear. Hi, Steve. Do you remember me, Steve? You gonna talk to me yet, Steve? Maybe acknowledge a few of my points, Steve? Maybe post some counter-arguments of your own, Steve? Perhaps address some of your critics, Steve? Steve? Steve?
Hey.
Hi.
So, I recently held a poll.
No, sorry, I'm being childish. But go on, Steve, you tell us all about that big poll that you took and how you worked really hard on it to get those delicious results that you wanted.
With my Patreon patrons to choose which previous 5 Stupid Things topics I should revisit, and first place was a tie. I covered the first half of the tie in the previous video in this series, so let's close this gimmick down with the second half of the first place tie. Here are 5 more stupid things about the men's rights movement.
I just hope that some neck-bearded, basement-dwelling, fedora-wearing perma-virgin doesn't come and spread his misogynistic euphoria all over it.
Selective acceptance. Men's rights activists don't typically exhibit terribly positive attitudes toward women.
Citation needed.
But there are exceptions.
So you just lied. Good start.
For example, women who agree with them that feminism is at best unnecessary and at worst oppressive and misandrist.
So men's rights activists are accepting of women who agree with their point of view. It's almost as if they don't arbitrarily hate and dismiss people based on their gender, but are instead inclusive of people who share similar thoughts. And somehow this is sexist.
Or, now you know what? That's it. Women who reject feminism are highly favored by MRAs. They're held up as evidence that theirs is a legitimate ideology based on facts and reasonable assumptions, not a hate movement based on projection, fears of inadequacy, and unhinged misogyny.
Right, so let me see if I understand your thought process here. Historically, and currently, you publish videos which makes the assertion that the men's rights movement and all men's rights activists are misogynistic, and that this is an essential characteristic to the movement and individuals therein. When men's rights activists and people within the men's rights movement actually then hold up the women within the movement and say, well, we have women within the movement, therefore how can we be misogynists, since misogyny is an unjustified and irrational hatred or mistrust of women, and you then point to this and say, aha! You are spending time with and talking to women and respecting their opinions, therefore you are a misogynist. Do you see why this is a very confusing thing? No, of course you don't. Also, can I just point out this?
Women who reject feminism are highly favored by MRAs. They're held up as evidence that theirs is a legitimate ideology.
Okay, now let's cut out some of the fluff.
Women who reject feminism is a legitimate ideology. Reject feminism. Legitimate ideology. Reject feminism. Ideology.
Is atheism a religion, Steve? Because not having an ideology is not an ideology. Also, observable facts and logic and empirical data is not an ideology. Also, I have not seen a men's rights activist ever hold up a woman and say, I have this, therefore my facts over here are true. The facts and empirical data used are separate from the women, except of course for when it's the women finding or presenting the empirical data. And rather interestingly, Steve, you seem to have neglected the fact that you just include all women who oppose feminism in this. You do realize that a woman can oppose feminism and not be a men's rights activist. And what about feminists who oppose the modern brands of feminism, who are frequently quite highly regarded within the men's rights movement? People such as Professor Christina Hoff Sommers and Camille Paglia. Just something to think about, Steve.
Anyway, if MRAs hate women so much, why are there women who agree with them? Funny how that same logic doesn't seem to apply to men who support feminism.
That's because the two are fundamentally very different. Men's rights activists tend to have objective goals to achieve. A few examples would be making it illegal to surgically alter the genitals of all infants below the age of majority outside of medical necessity, which is a specific legal right and protection afforded to females within the Western world, but not to males. Objective criteria for success. The concept that selective service, or the draft, should either be abolished for men or extended to include women. Again, objective criteria for success, affording the same legal reproductive rights to both men and women in regards to parenthood, usually phrased in regards to things such as consent to sex not being consent to reproduction. For example, a woman can have sex, become pregnant, and then either keep or abort the child. Postcoital rejection of parenthood is not an option afforded to the man. Again, there is an objective criteria for success, which is when a man at any time can walk away from a child and say, I do not want responsibility, and not have the state endlessly pursue him as a result. If a woman can opt out of parenthood, a man should have the same legal right. And don't just take my word for it. These very objective goals are actually laid out on A Voice for Men, which is a very popular men's rights website. Now, while there isn't certainly universal agreement amongst every men's rights activist as to what the exact goals of the movement are, there is still a large amount of agreement and overlap between all of them, and you can see this from simply watching any men's rights videos here on YouTube. The problem is, by comparison, when you ask feminists, what is your objective goal, you get the very wishy-washy answer of equality. And they then fail to lay out any objective terms for what they consider this equality to be, or to what objective standards every person needs to be held, or specific laws that they want to have changed, repealed, or enacted. And the worst part is that there is barely any consistency, as evidenced by modern feminists.
Yeah, I don't really care if Camille Paglia calls herself a feminist any more than I give a shit if Christina Hoff Sommers calls herself a feminist. Okay, it's of no concern of mine. What she is someone with some ridiculous, completely incompatible philosophical and political views, and yeah, I just don't give a shit about them.
Yes, that is the example of a modern feminist telling another feminist that they are not a feminist. Notice the total lack of objective criteria. But while there may be agreement within some fields of feminism, it is certainly not universal throughout the movement.
Dishonest denial. One of the most interesting phenomena surrounding the men's rights movement is how many men will strenuously deny having any association with it, even while parroting its talking points. And really, who can blame them? The men's rights movement is so toxic, so obviously fueled by bigotry and male insecurity that even people who agree with everything MRAs typically say don't want to be taken for one.
You have a wonderful circle of logic going on here, and I'm going to unravel it for you. You see, Steve, when you say things like this...
For example, there are some in the MRM who have pointed out that it's unfair that men in the United States have to register with Selective Service when they turn 18, while women don't have to. I agree. Others have suggested that family courts might be unfairly biased in favor of mothers and against fathers when it comes time to deciding things like child custody. I think that's a serious issue. And again, I think we as a society should be just as intolerant of domestic abuse that victimizes men as we have become, relatively recently, I would like to point out, of domestic violence that victimizes women.
You have just advocated for the rights of men, and yet I get this very distinct feeling that you will deny that this would make you a men's rights activist. But why would you want to deny such a thing? Well, it's because people like you come along and say,
it's misogynistic. This is the one inescapable fact about the men's rights movement that makes it impossible for me to support.
Do you see the circle of logic yet? You support men's rights, but you don't want to be called a men's rights activist. You don't want to be called a men's rights activist because it has a negative connotation. A negative connotation of your own making, that you have presented with zero evidence. And because you inform other people of this with zero evidence, they then believe that it is true, which leads you right back round to the beginning of the circle where you support men's rights, but you don't want to be considered one because you have convinced other people that if you're a men's rights activist, you're a terrible person. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy, Steve.
Luckily, if you're a guy who is sick and tired of being called an MRA when you're not one, there's a real easy fix. Just stop being such a sexist crybaby. Try it. You might be surprised how well that works for you.
Well, Steve, we have video evidence of you advocating for men's rights, so I'm just going to call you a men's rights activist. Guess it's time you stood behind those beliefs and stopped being such a crybaby.
Harassment of critics. The men's rights movement is reactionary by its very nature.
Citation needed, because evidence points to the contrary. To be a reactionary means that you would want to either keep things as they are or roll the clock backwards. Wanting to ban male circumcision outside of exclusively medical reasons is not a reactionary viewpoint, it is a progressive viewpoint. Wanting selective service or the draft to either be abolished for men or extended to include women is not a reactionary viewpoint, it is a progressive viewpoint. Wanting paternity fraud to be punishable on the same level as any other kind of fraud is not a reactionary position. It is a progressive position. Are you noticing something in common with all of these? They are not reactionary. They're not trying to take things back to how they were, because none of these standards have existed in the past. They are, in fact, pushing to move the world forward. I'm getting very sick of people labeling others as reactionaries simply because they want to move things in a different direction from them. Different is not always backward. There is not one objective way forward. There are many, although some are better supported by empirical data than others. And just a point on this reactionaries versus progressives nonsense that keeps coming up. When you make the argument that we must do something because it will progress society, you're actually making a fallacious argument known as the appeal to novelty, basically stating that because something is new, it must be better than what currently exists, which is not always true. Also, consider your relentless push for progress. Now, this point isn't specifically aimed at Shives here, but it's aimed at pretty much most of these social justice or feminist people who will constantly advocate for social progress at the exclusion of caution. One day, when you get to your final end goal and you believe that you live in a utopian society where nothing can be made better, someone will come along and want to try something new, and then you will be on the receiving end of being relentlessly called a reactionary because you are opposing progress, as if progress alone is the basis of a good argument. Food for thought.
It lashes out at women and feminists in particular. On a daily basis, feminist writers and activists are deluged with hate mail and death threats from outraged men. Some, like Lindy West or Anita Sarkeesian, are arguably better known for being victims of misogynist harassment than for their actual work.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that they publish and publicize this harassment more than they do their actual work.
Others have been driven from the public sphere altogether, which is understandable, but is also a terrible shame, because that's what the harassers want.
Okay, you want to talk about harassment. Let's talk about harassment. Isolated individual comments from individuals is not harassment. It might feel like it, especially when it comes at you on the daily as a sort of wall of noise. Hell, even I get individual hate comments and hate messages and hate emails from people. But they are just individual messages from individual people, and I don't really give a fuck about them. In fact, they give me something to laugh at. In order for something to be harassment, it needs to be sustained and it needs to be intentional and designed to cause harm or fear. Critiquing someone's work is not harassment. But you know what is harassment? Blockading a lecture hall so that people cannot get in to attend a conference that is in session. Chanting outside a lecture hall and pulling a fire alarm specifically to disrupt a conference in session. Disrupting a conference and threatening a speaker because you disagree with their views. And sending individuals very lengthy, detailed threats of physical violence. Also, killing someone's dog and driving them out of the country even after they set up the first battered women's refuge in the country because they accidentally stated that women can be aggressors as well. All of these examples and more perpetrated by feminists.
Unable to intelligently answer their critics, they attempt to intimidate them into silence.
Citation needed. I've put my evidence up. Where's yours?
And when that doesn't work, when they are unable to overwhelm feminists with the sheer force of abuse, they resort to other equally vapid tactics.
Like blocking them on Twitter when they're unable to intelligently answer their critics, Steve.
Derailment and distraction. Many MRAs engage in a sort of troll guerrilla warfare, infiltrating the comment sections of articles and videos that deal with women's issues, posting responses designed to paralyze discussion with irrelevant bickering. Demands that feminists identify legal rights available to men but not to women are common.
Demands that people provide actual, objective, empirical evidence of their claims is irrelevant bickering, is it, Steve? No. The demand for proof of a claim is not paralyzing a conversation or a discussion. It is facilitating a conversation or discussion. But of course, you're projecting here, Steve. In your last video, you confessed to maybe being ignorant on the rates of domestic violence between men and women. I gave a very comprehensive breakdown of several sources to do with domestic violence between men and women and the rates of perpetration and victimization. You then refused to watch said content and blocked any communication dealing with it. Not only myself, but from other users online. This combined with your confirmed and well-known deletion of comments and messages that disagree with you shows to everyone, Steve, that you are the person who has paralyzed the discussion on this issue. But, as I said, you're projecting.
There's also the ever-popular appeal to bigger problems, in which the MRA will express his dismay that feminists aren't more concerned with the plight of women in developing countries or the Muslim world.
Because no feminist has ever done the same. Ever. Not even once. But again, we come to a very crucial difference here. The problems that feminists complain about in the first world tend to be very subjective issues of opinion, such as when they state ridiculous things like, catcalling is a problem and needs to be dealt with. And then a whole host of women come out of the woodwork and say, well, actually, no, I like being catcalled because it's a confidence booster, and other ones saying that they wish it happened to them. This is the sort of stuff that feminism in the first world is dealing with. Subjective interpretations of things that make a few people feel a little bit uncomfortable. And therefore the whole of society must change to accommodate them, because they have the legal right to not be offended, damn it.
It's not that he gives a shit about those women.
Citation needed. A lot of MRAs are actually concerned about the treatment of all people in third world countries, which is why many refer to themselves as the MHRM, Men's Human Rights Movement.
He just thinks that feminists should worry more about them and leave sexist American assholes like him alone.
Let's just go through that bit again, because there's a lot that I want to say there, and I thought it would break it up a little bit too much if I did it straight off the bat.
He just thinks that feminists should worry more about them.
Well, a little bit less of the me approach would be nice from modern feminism.
And leave sexist
Implying all men's rights activists are sexist with zero evidence.
American
Implying all men's rights activists are American.
assholes like him.
Implying all men's rights activists are male. Didn't even ask about their preferred pronouns. Steve, I am disappointed.
Still, this isn't the worst thing about the men's rights movement.
What you actually mean is that this isn't the biggest lie that you've told about them to date. But I sense that that's coming up.
When it comes to that, it's hard to get more disgusting and inexcusable than rape apology. Men's rights activists attempt to minimize or dismiss concerns about rape in a variety of ways, ignoring the existence of acquaintance and spousal rape.
Please, Steve, citation needed. I have never heard a men's rights activist ever state that spousal rape and acquaintance rape don't exist. But please, Steve, find me a men's rights activist. Not a pickup artist, not a MGTOW, not an anti-feminist, an actual confirmed and prominent men's rights activist who says that spousal rape and acquaintance rape do not happen. And I promise you, Steve, I swear right now in front of all of the people who will ever watch this video that if you find me a men's rights activist who says this, and truly genuinely means it, I will make a video about it and point out the stupidity of that individual.
Spreading fear and paranoia about a non-existent epidemic of false rape allegations.
Steve, Rolling Stone, have you heard of it? Good. They published a rape story. It was completely fictitious. In fact, there is so little evidence supporting the claims made in that article that UVA is now suing Rolling Stone. You didn't know about the suing part because that happened after the release of your video, but you damn well knew about the UVA case. Just like you damn well knew about the existence of Mattress Girl. That's right, Emma fuck me in the butt Sulkowitz. The woman who made a false rape accusation, which was found to be false by both the university and the police and everyone presiding over the case, and yet she was permitted and supported in a sustained campaign of harassment against the man that she falsely accused. The Duke Lacrosse case, where even to this day, the falsely accused still face social ostracism. And these are just a few of the high-profile examples. There are many more. How many examples do you need, Steve, before you are willing to accept that this is a problem?
And generally acting as though making rape an easier crime for men to get away with is their primary goal, which it is.
Citation needed, if you please.
This is not a civil rights movement as it claims to be. This is a hate group, populated by resentful failures too weak to carry their own baggage.
Speaking of failures who are too weak to carry their own baggage, isn't it funny, Steve, that by your own admission you had to beg for other people to give you their money so that you wouldn't be living below the poverty line? But yeah, you sure are in the position to be calling other people pathetic.
They're some of the most pathetic human beings known to me.
Whoa, hang on. Did anyone else notice that? The most pathetic humans known to me. That's a very odd turn of phrase, isn't it, Steve? Because normally in a situation like that you'd say known to man, or known to mankind. But no, your opinion and your view is above that. Because in your sick, twisted little mind, you are the only good man, the only true man, and every other man is beneath you and to be judged by you.
And their only redeeming quality is that they're so much damn fun to smack around, which is fitting since most of them seem to think that's all women are good for.
Citation needed. Until then, I guess we can just all live comfortably in the knowledge that Steve Shives is a child molester. Oh, what's that, Steve? You're not? Well, I figured while we were just throwing out baseless accusations with no evidence to back them up, I might as well just go for the big hit.
The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.
No, the hardest part was keeping myself interested while editing this video, since you seem to have conveniently totally ignored any topic of objective reality this time, so that I couldn't even keep myself amused with lengthy studies and lots of numbers and evidence, and you have instead simply regressed down to subjective opinion and ad hominem attacks.